step forward and help out, they tend to step back. That's not what God is calling us to do. And as a church, we have to step forward, not only as individuals, but collectively as a church. Often the things that need and require for us to step forward are too big for each and every one of us. And so we need the help of our neighbors, of our friends here at church, of the resources at church, for us to step forward and make a difference. But every once in a while, if not on a daily basis, there's an opportunity every single day for us to step forward and respond to God's call. Back in 1972, New York City was a mess. Anybody here lived in New York City in the early 70s? You will know, and you could testify as to what a mess it was. That's around the time when Mayor Ed Koch went ahead and, or is it Coach? No, it's not Coach, it's Koch. Decided to step forward and clean up New York City and to help out with all sorts of things. But there were so many different difficulties and problems in New York City. And one day, this young man froze to death out in New York City. And he's laying dead, frozen, and people just kept on stepping over him and stepping around him. And not one person stopped until another young man came upon him, last name of Donnelly, and was so moved to action by the inaction around him that he got others and members of his family to go ahead and do something. And they created an organization called DOOR, and sometimes called The Door. And they specifically minister to the homeless, to those who are less privileged, and they provide all sorts of counseling, all sorts of job referrals, and opportunities for the homeless. This is one story among many of how people, they see a problem, and they see everybody else stepping back, and now, this is me, I have to do it. Today we have seen and witnessed the members of our youth group and how it is that they're stepping forward. Not one of them is stepping back. This is your opportunity, members of youth group, and those of you who are graduating seniors, to step forward into the world and know that chances are there's many people who are going to be stepping back, and they're not going to step with you. But the difference that is made by those that step forward is monumental. And as you go out to college, as you go out and study to become the women and the men that God intends for you to be, you will get this wonderful opportunity to step forward and make a difference. I want to read and share with you several examples of young people nowadays, in our own generation, in your generation, who have stepped forward to make a difference. At the age of 9, Shawn Johnson, back in 2013, Chicago Public Schools announced that they were closing 54 public schools, among them his elementary school. And Shawn Johnson was just beside himself. He couldn't think that his school was going to be shut down, and where would he go? And he went to the adults, he went to the parents, he went to the school system, and what were they doing? They were stepping back. Not one of them was stepping forward to advocate for his elementary school. And so Shawn, at the age of 9, stepped forward, and he spoke eloquently, he spoke with passion, and he spoke in such a way that the superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools decided to keep his elementary school open. And then the real job began of how to make that public school viable, how to make it one that succeeds. By 2016, that school was up to par and performing at level with all the other ones. And it all began with one 9-year-old. Shawn DeAngelo, while attending Morehouse College in his freshman year, several months away from where you guys are now, okay, founded the first black-owned bicycle shop called We Cycle Atlanta. And he did this after he saw so many people out of shape, so many people that were grossly overweight. And he goes, there's a way to do this in a way that's fun. And he started to get cycling, which was part of his life for the longest time. He's still in college today, and he's a senior, but he's one of those college students that has his own business that's running, is becoming very successful, and he's one to look out for in Atlanta because he's really making a difference. Not too long ago, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, as you know, that school suffered so many lives lost because of the shooter. And as an entire school system, as an entire Florida legislature was stepping back, some students stepped forward. And I'm going to name just two of them, but in reality, there's a lot more. Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg. You saw them, right? You saw them on TV. What a way to step forward. But why did they step forward? Because everybody else was stepping back. And as the world stepped back, they decided to step forward and have their voices be heard. And then, on the other side of the globe, in Pakistan, a young woman being educated and promoting education in a country that does not like for women to be educated. The Taliban in Pakistan actively keeps women from going to school. But Malala Yousafzai decided that she would speak up. And she stepped forward. And for that, she got shot in the face. She survived. If you were to take a look at Malala today, you'll see a beautiful young woman disfigured by the shot. But beautiful still, because she speaks with this deep conviction and faith that education, especially education for all girls, is very important. And she continues to struggle and to help her country and her people promote the values of education. This is happening here too. We don't really have to look too far. We have an entire youth group going on mission, going forward, being commissioned. And this summer is a very, very important time for you to step forward. But summertime is not the only time for you to step forward. We have throughout the school year multiple opportunities. And one of our very, very own, Lily Loist, was given an award, a humanitarian award, because of all the many hours of community services she put forward and the many times that she went ahead and was there when others were not. So as a church, as a pastor, we're all very proud of you. And as Keith said, the future of the church depends on you. But this very nation, so many people in St. Petersburg and beyond depend on you to continue to step forward. Today's passage is about Eli. Eli stepping forward. Eli not knowing what was happening, responding to God's call. But in reality, it's also about, that was Samuel. It's about Samuel stepping forward. But it's also about Eli. Now, a few verses earlier, you have the description of Eli. Eli was an elderly priest in the Jewish temple. And it says in the book of Samuel that Eli had not really met God's expectations. That Eli and his sons, who were part of that priestly clan, were not really doing what God wanted them to do. And so God was going to go ahead and replace them. That Eli and his sons would no longer be priests of the temple, and they would be replaced with a new generation. With that in mind, here comes the most important part of the story. Young Samuel is hearing God's call. And who does he go to? He goes to the elderly priest. And the elderly priest, fully knowing his limitations, how he has failed, how he has not met God's expectations, at that moment has to do the most important thing, and that is to guide young Samuel to answer God's call. And from there arose a prophet. We don't know any more about Eli and his sons. His story ends there. That's as far as he goes. Now we can connect to the story in multiple ways. And the main two, the most obvious two, is that God is calling us. And we could hear God's call. But do we know that it is God? Can we respond to God's call? How God calls us, each and in our own way, for us to give from our own talents, from our own way that God has blessed us is up to us. But some of us may be able to connect with Eli. We are part of the older generation. We are part of a generation that has failed, that too often has stepped back. We are full of an awareness of how we have failed and we have wronged and the wrongs that we have committed. But yet, standing before us are some young people. And then we ought to guide them. We ought to lead them. And just like Eli, say, when you hear God's call, stand and say, your servant is listening. That was the most important thing that Eli did in the passage, because from there arose a great prophet. And before each and every one of us, a young person may come to us, unaware of our failings, unaware of how we have contributed to a problem. But at that moment, we could be part of the solution. We could be part of a new future, of a new generation that steps forward and takes over from Eli and takes over from the clergy. Let us guide them. Let us lead them. Let us have them recognize God's call. Let us be part of the people that not only helps others, but also steps forward. Because in that stepping forward, as others are stepping back, the world will change. Lives will change. People will change. And our relationship with God will be strengthened. And the church will continue to endure. Amen.
Every week we receive an offering, which is really an investment. It's an investment.